Some people that were talking about reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes.
Wow. What's up, everyone? Coach D speaks with the MeidasTouch Network. So typically when I'm having a debate or an argument with a white conservative, it'll go something like this. I will tell them that I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana in the 80s. And I'll say during that time, man, I dealt with a whole lot of police brutality, discrimination, racism, and things like that. And instead of acknowledging my experience, they will say something to me like, have you read any Thomas Sowell books? Listen, I know who Thomas Sowell is. I don't need a white conservative to refer me to a black author who is going to try and diminish my experiences by telling me that he hasn't had those experiences. So they always do that, or I'll be talking to someone and I'll say, yeah, like black people in this country have it hard. There's a lot of things that are going on. There are things that we really need to fix in this country to make the black experience and the black success rise in this country. And then they'll say something like, well, have you listened to any Candace Owens? Again, I don't need a black person to diminish my experiences or try to tell me that I have not experienced certain things in this country because they haven't experienced those things. It gets really, really old to us. So when I come across a video from someone like Mark Robinson, who's running for governor right now, saying the things that he's saying, it just reminds me of exactly that type of thing. And what's sad, what is really sad for black conservatives, which I don't really have an issue with political parties. If you want to be a black Republican, a black conservative, that's fine with me. But what I'm finding with black conservatives these days is that you cannot be a black conservative unless you spend most of your time on radio, on television, in front of podiums of white audiences criticizing black people. Seriously, the next time you guys are paying attention to black conservatives, just listen. They're only brought on to do interviews. They're only pushed out to the front of the Republican Party if they spend a lot of their time criticizing black people, diminishing the black experience, and just basically being a tap dancer for these all-white conservative audiences. Check out this video.
Some people that were talking about reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes. Why do you owe? Because somebody in those fields took stripes for you.
Okay, first of all, Republicans always make up these interactions that they've had with liberals. I made this liberal so mad because I told him to his face, nobody owes you reparations for slavery. It's you who owes. Things that never happened for $1,000, Alex. They just make that stuff up. And second, most black people in America who talk about reparations at all, talk about reparations in the form of revitalizing black communities that have been historically neglected. Now, what's funny about that is that if a white community asks for a school to be revitalized or a new building to be put up or for sidewalks in that community, we call that infrastructure. But when black people ask for it, what's actually owed to them, you want to call it reparations. But I love this take that he has, because this is a new one for me. He's basically saying, like, America doesn't owe black people anything. Black people owes white America for our freedom. We should be thanking them for giving us all this freedom that we have right now. But go on, Mr. Robinson. I got a feeling this tap dancing gets a lot better as you go along.
Somebody, after those fields were ended and slavery was ended, somebody had to walk through Jim Crow for you. Somebody fought wars and died for you. Somebody lived less than because they didn't have what you have, and they did it for you. There are people in their graves right now, and they are there because they were willing to stand up and fight for you. Those folks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge carrying American flags, take that, Colin Kaepernick.
And there it is. The best way to get uplifted in the Republican Party, if you are a black conservative, you have to invoke and criticize Colin Kaepernick. We haven't heard Colin Kaepernick's name in years, but he knows, I gotta get these people excited. I gotta get them excited. Here it comes. Take that, Colin Kaepernick. But it gets even worse, because check out the freaking story that he tells next.
Living in a society that he could scarcely acknowledge, something that he has never known, living with a bigotry that none of us can imagine. Carried American flags on that bridge, and when they were hit upside the head with nightsticks and shot with water hoses and knocked to the ground, they got up and picked those flags up and kept marching.
Listen, if you have to make up dramatic stories and try and rewrite history in order to make your point more valid, you really don't have a leg to stand on. We can all go straight to Google and look at pictures from that march on Selma. We can look at pictures of them marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And yes, you might see some American flags, but John Lewis and Martin Luther King and the other people who were up front and center, they weren't carrying American flags. And even if they were, why is that the part that you want to focus on? What you should be focusing on are the atrocities that you mentioned. Them being beat to the ground, them being sprayed with water hoses. That's the focus of this. At least you're acknowledging that that part happened. But to make this story up about them being beaten and then they grabbed those American flags and they went back to marching. No, that's not the important part. Dude, I really don't know how these black conservatives do it. I don't know how you get, the money must be so good to have this man stand up there and make up a story about his own people just to appease a room full of racist white conservatives. But go on.
And they did it for you. Nobody owes you anything. If anybody owes, it's you. Because you've been the benefactor of freedom. You are the one that owes.
If you think black people in America owes white America anything for slavery or the civil rights movement or our freedom, you got problems. That has to be one of the most asinine statements I have ever heard, and he should be ashamed of himself for saying it out loud. And listen, slavery happened. Re-enslavement happened. Jim Crow happened. The civil rights movement happened. Redlining happened. Everyone acknowledges that. Even he acknowledges that. During that time, America was able to hoard a lot of money due to the free labor that they got from black people. Then, during redlining, they redlined black people into certain communities. Those communities were underfunded and over-policed. So we had mass incarceration. So those communities had less black fathers because they were incarcerated because of illegal things happening right here in this country. They were also underfunded. So black people were saying, take the tax dollars that you were able to hoard because of our free labor and put it back into our communities. Just like I said, we do infrastructure in white communities all the time. Let's do infrastructure plans in black communities. Let's overfund our schools. Let's overfund our parks. Let's overfund these communities. Let's make sure that we get policing in these communities that are highly trained and definitely held accountable. I mean, big time held accountable. That's what we want. It is really that simple. You start doing things like that, you will watch Black communities become more successful, become way more uplifting, become way more proud. Let's stop pretending that this history didn't happen. Let's stop pretending that these communities aren't suffering because of history and because of what's going on in them right now. Again, I don't know how these Black conservatives do it. Some of them grew up in these communities that they stand up there and criticize right now. It's sad. It's sad to watch them do things like this when they could easily say, you know what? We need to fund these communities. These communities that we know, these schools look the way they do. These communities look the way they do because we underfunded them. We know that some of these Black families are suffering because of the way that we treated their fathers. They could easily say those things, but instead, they would rather get applause for putting a Black face on white racism. Period.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.